Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for staying. Assuming I'm still here. Maybe you're hiding from the weather. But I hope you've enjoyed the day so far. We'd like to finish with something which usually is a successful thing, which is a panel, hopefully trying to more broadly unpick some of the bigger issues that we've started to explore through some of these sessions today. I'm going to ask the panelists to answer some couple of questions before we then move on to questions from the audience. And so I'm more than happy to take questions from the audience, and then you can direct them to any of our esteemed and distinguished and star-studded panel. Some of the most powerful and glamorous voices in education in the world. So, can I invite our panelists to briefly introduce themselves to the audience? Starting with
Elizabeth Rata. I'm the Director of the Knowledge in Education Research Unit at the University of Auckland.
Michael Johnston, Faculty of Education at Victoria University.
Briar Lipson from the New Zealand Initiative.
Kia ora koutou, Glen, Denham, Principal at Massey, but more importantly, grandfather.
I think we can tell the kind of audience we have here. You've got a big platform. Okay, so moving on to the first question here. I think it's really, really important that for many of us involved in education, particularly if you work in an institution like a school, even if you're not, it's very, very easy to become bogged down by the minutiae of the day-to-day tasks. I think it's really important sometimes to draw back and look at the big picture and talk about things like the aim of education and the kind of more global, holistic state of education in the sector in which you work. So my first question to the panelists, and I'd like you to speak for no more than 4 minutes. Now, we'll be harsh taskmaster on this. Is what is the current state of education in New Zealand? And I'd like to start with Elizabeth, please.
Okay, 4 minutes starting now. Well, 2 main problems which I identified in my talk earlier. First one about the emptying out of knowledge from the curriculum. So we've ended up with a curriculum that is driven by knowledge, how, or skills. And the other real problem is the localisation of education, so that rather than us having a standardised education system, local communities now make extremely important decisions. And that are the sort of the decisions about what is taught that need to be made at a national level for 2 reasons. One is that every child has access to the same quality and type of education and type of knowledge, academic knowledge, but just as important is this idea that when a society teaches knowledge that is throughout the nation, then there is a sense of belonging. Durkheim calls it the collective consciousness of the people. Given that, as New Zealanders, we don't share a common history. We all come from different backgrounds. Historically, we come from different socio-cultural groups. And what is it that makes us feel we belong? What is the unifying principle? Schools, right from the 1877 Education Act, we were aware that the development of a collective, of our collective representations of how we understand ourselves as a people has to be created, because it doesn't come from our history, given we have different histories. So how do we do it? Well, we do it in our education system. Now, when the education system stops doing it, then what is to stop us fragmenting as a people, where we see ourselves only in terms of belonging to specific socio-cultural groups, where we see ourselves as through our differences, not our commonalities. Now, I do want to say one more thing, which is about evidence. So it's a different topic, but I'm sure I've got several minutes. Now, I would like to issue a word of caution to research about evidence, because, you know, and the Greeks talked about this, Descartes talked about it when he advised us, just beware of, don't trust what you see, you know, beware of what your senses show you. Because what really matters with research is how it is explained. You can have the same data, but you can have many different ways of explaining it. For example, if we look at data which shows that a subsection of Māori children can consistently underachieve, and I'm not talking about the children of the Māori middle class, I'm talking about a particular subsection of Māori children who consistently underachieve. The data tells us that, we know it. So there you've got evidence of something. What does that mean? What does it mean? You can have explanations that range from the dominant one in New Zealand at the moment, which is these children don't achieve because their cultural identity, culture understood as ethnicity, is not recognised. So therefore the solution comes from that, which is cultural responsive pedagogies. So that's one explanation of that data. Another explanation on the other side is that subsection of the community underachieved because of specific circumstances associated with their socio-economic class position, which could be poverty, it could be deprivation in a number of areas, which manifest themselves through particular home cultural lifestyles. And therefore the solution is not more of the same, not more of the home culture, but in fact less of it. Taking those children through their minds out of that deprived world they live in, giving them the world access through ideas and through the mind. So just a warning to research ed, be careful when you claim that evidence provides answers. No, it doesn't. Philosophy provides answers. Evidence provides data from empirical studies, but it is philosophy. It is what things mean, and it is the logic of philosophy. So philosophy is not belief. Philosophy is the logical analysis of what what is said, of statements. So in the giving meaning to the evidence, one must differentiate between belief, what I want to be the case, and what logic says is possibly the case. But of course, with all science, it's only ever provisional, it's only a possibility.
Thank you. So I've heard, I guess, two overarching themes here today, which I think sum up quite well the state of our education system at the moment, and neither of them are very edifying. One, as I'm sure Elizabeth would agree, and she's alluded to just then, is that knowledge is viewed with suspicion, if not completely absent, from the way in which we approach curriculum. That's a curiosity. Why is it so? Why is it like that? That's what I'm trying to grapple with now. What has happened to us to bring us to this point? The other is about evidence. It's about what we do in educational policy and on what basis. So if I cast my mind over the last few years, well, what have we got? We've got bring your own device. We've got modern learning environments. We had national standards. We have NCEA. All of these things have been introduced, and they may or may not be effective. We haven't looked. We didn't introduce them on the basis of sound evidence. They weren't trialled. Perhaps they could work. Perhaps there are good things about them and not so good. We didn't find out, and that's the problem. Why is that so? What's the basis on which we introduce educational policy? And I don't have the answers, but there are things that are plainly not working. We have poor and falling literacy and poor and falling numeracy. We have great difficulty attracting subject matter experts, especially in things like science and mathematics. There's an underlying malaise there, and we have to find out what it is, and we have to do it fast, because things, once you have a generation go through a system without a memory of what sound learning looks like, you're in real trouble. So, what is that malaise? I don't know, but I want to put something on the table for us to think about. And forgive me if I've got it wrong, but I'm just trying out ideas here. So I suspect that it's a malaise that goes beyond our education system, the core of our civilization. I think that the disciplines that we're talking about in our education system, mathematics, science, history, these things, have existed outside the education system and evolved over centuries as powerful methods of understanding the world. And with certain exceptions and caveats, they're largely understandings that have come out of Western civilization. Now, Western civilization has a lot to answer for, but we also have a lot to be grateful to it for. I'm concerned that we're in huge danger of throwing all the babies out with the bathwater. There are difficult histories that we have to confront. The Western culture did colonise the world to the detriment of many people. We have to acknowledge that. But at the same time, it gave us the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment, as far as I know, is the only time when things like the institution of slavery have been challenged and abolished in the world. So there's some pretty good things about those understandings of the world as well. Got to be careful about letting them go lightly. I think part of the problem is a conflation of two hierarchies based on history. So one is a hierarchy of knowledge, and a hierarchy of knowledge is something I would defend. There are kinds of knowledge that are powerful and kinds of knowledge that are less powerful to make a difference in people's lives. And that's not just in sort of crude economic terms, but in cultural terms, even spiritual terms. What is it that gives us being in the world, that gives us a way to be powerfully? Now, it is true that historically, the most powerful forms of knowledge have been restricted in their accessibility along socioeconomic lines. That isn't something I defend. But I feel as if what has happened is that in an effort to challenge the socioeconomic hierarchy and who gets access to the powerful knowledge, we've actually come to a point where we deny there is any powerful knowledge at all, which is of course the wrong way to solve the problem. The right way to solve the problem is to ask, how do we bring that powerful knowledge to everybody? How do we abolish the socioeconomic injustice without compromising the knowledge that everybody should have? And I could well be wrong, but that's where I've got to in my thinking so far. Thank you very much.
Bang on time as well, so I appreciate that too. Thank you, Briar.
How do I follow those two? My NCA report that came out a few months ago looked at the evidence from NCA and PISA. If anyone's looked at it, there's a graph in there that shows NCA level 2 pass rates just go up and up and up at the time in New Zealand, and PISA data just goes down and down and down at the same time. You know, various excuses are provided sometimes for that children are 15 when they sit one exam, 16 when they sit the other, so maybe that's the explanation. Or the NCA assesses something very different to PISA. And that's true to some extent, because PISA is a test of reading, maths and science, and NCA can be an assessment of whatever you want it to be. But are we really happy with an assessment system that can be of anything we want it to be? Do we not think that those core subjects are important enough that all students should have to study them? And my report, there's a theory in there, which is that the design of NCA exacerbates and widens the achievement gap in New Zealand. It's all but impossible to prove this. It is a theory in that report. It's impossible to prove it empirically because of the vast flexibility within NCA, which masks a huge spectrum of actual attainment. But of course, PISA data is much more specific, and it does suggest we have a problem. PISA also suggests that New Zealand has the worst equity of all English-speaking countries, and that it's declining. So, what's the state of New Zealand education? It looks like there might be a problem. As for what needs to happen, I will try to summarise, I think, within 3 points. I don't need to talk a lot about the first one, which is the New Zealand curriculum. My colleagues on the panel have done a much better job than I would do of explaining our concerns about that. I think, just briefly, the unions have done great work recently in raising the profile of the conversation about the lack of teachers in New Zealand and issues with recruitment and retention. And I can't help but feel that subject associations get little airtime or funding, and conversations about curriculum subjects are not in the fore, and the ministry and perhaps the New Zealand curriculum have some part to play in reinvigorating the role of subjects and subject disciplines in the curriculum. And next I want to talk about assessment. I'd like to see a more mature conversation about assessment in New Zealand. When I became a teacher, it was because I wanted to develop students who could make the world a better place, who every child has an entitlement to the common inheritance of human endeavour, and that's what motivated me. I wasn't motivated to get children through assessments, but of course that's what lots of us find ourselves doing. So why should we even care about assessments? It's the kind of dry, desiccated end of the conversation. It appears often inimical to everything we really want from education. Not the lofty goals, it's the jumping through hoops. But actually, assessment is essential because it's a form of measurement. And measurement is invariably the prelude to improvement and innovation. I recently spent a small amount of time in hospital having a baby, and all kinds of things were measured constantly. Clinical diagnosis relies constantly on measurement: the heart rate, the size of its head, its glucose levels when she came out, whether she's recognising auditory signals, and so forth. Modern medicine relies on measurement, and we need, if we can't do assessment better, if we can do assessment better, I think we'll be able to do education better. Of course, unlike in other areas, in education we can only ever measure a proxy for real learning. Learning is invisible. So when we have children sit exams, we ask them to make something that's invisible, visible. So of course there will always be ways to distort assessments. There will be teaching to the test and focusing on a narrow sample, because we can't measure those huge soaring missions and goals of education that we all care about. But that doesn't mean assessment doesn't have a value and a place. And there are 2 solutions to it. The first solution is that we must design assessments that limit the distortions, and my report is full of recommendations around that. And the second solution that we must always do is to acknowledge the tension and always keep our eyes on the prize, which is the wider goals of the curriculum, developing knowledge and skills. And the New Zealand curriculum is visionary and full of those larger goals that we should keep our eyes on. But we also need to think about how we get children to be skillful. We want them to be skillful, we can all agree on that. But actually, what Catherine and others have talked about today is that the cognitive science tells us very clearly that you cannot be skillful in something, you cannot solve problems and be critical thinking if you don't have the background knowledge. And on that assessment point, I'm going to say something potentially even more controversial, which is that I think it's time we started looking at pupil progress. Because one of the reasons assessment is controversial is because in Glen school and in Tim's school, the children, perhaps at the intake point, are at such different levels. It's not fair to have assessments and measure children from such different backgrounds against, without also looking at where they were when they arrived. And so if you want to start looking at progress, you have to have a benchmark for when children arrive in secondary schools. Lots of secondary heads talk to me about, well, you know, when they come to us, they're not reading, so we can't really be expected to get them through English assessments at NCEA. And that excuse will persist for as long as we don't know what position they're at when they come up from primary schools. So without the data, we just can't know. And so I'd like to see a more mature conversation about assessment. And I'm going to close with, I'm going to read you something from a blog. Some of you may have come across Ben Riley, who I know has spoken at research events in the past. He wrote a blog while here some years ago, a couple of years ago, as part of an Oxford Fellowship at the Ministry of Education. And I'm going to read you a passage from it. With all official fellowship obligations complete, let me now speak free and frankly to my host agency, the New Zealand Ministry of Education. You viewed, and I suspect continue to view, this blog, and perhaps me individually, as a massive risk. That you could not control what I say, or even what I was looking into, absolutely terrified you. This is a major problem, and I think you should collectively spend some time thinking about what needs to change. The Ministry of Education did not oppress me because I'm not an employee of the Ministry. But of course, not everyone is as lucky as me. So to the extent the Ministry fosters a culture of fear, a culture of mistrust, a culture that inhibits communication, a culture that treats friendly people who visit from abroad, hoping to help and learn from you, as risks rather than assets, well, I press upon the Ministry to consider what sort of pedagogy it's collectively practicing, and why it is that so many people I met, who work there now, or have worked there in the past, or have to work with the Ministry in some other capacity, describe the experience as oppressive and miserable. There, I had to get that off my chest. And now for the much more measured executive summary to my report. And I must caveat that Ben has incredible passion and enthusiasm for this country and what he learned, and lots of the work of people he met. And it's unfair of me to only read that rather negative assessment of the work of the Ministry. So I'd encourage anyone who wants to read more to look at his blog, Karanga, and that's Ben Riley. But I think as a newcomer to the country, I have to say I have been somewhat taken aback at the paucity of debate, and that's the whole purpose of research ed. Because as like Michael said, we don't have the answers. I suspect that together people do, and I hope that through organisations like this we really will create a renaissance, and that teachers can take their profession and turn it into what they want it to be for the good of New Zealand children.
Thank you, Briar. I particularly like the fact you were rolling your solutions together with the state of New Zealand at the same time, so we'll come back to that as well if you want to say anything more. And finally, Glen.
Do you know when you think you're sitting at the wrong table? I'm trying to eat off. You're all getting brainy. Because I went to Teachers College because I had 2 cracks at school, so 2 cracks at uni. And I said to my mum, why am I the best player at rugby? Why am I the strongest and the biggest? And she says, because you're 23. Let me tell you a story. I'm from Denham, and my mother, God bless her soul, brought 6 of us up by South Māori family in Denham. Not many Māoris in Denham. Anyone from Denham? Yeah. And I want to tell you a story about inequity. And that's our problem in our society. And so 6 Māori kids. My mother was very dark-skinned Māori, and I was probably the lightest out of all my brothers and sisters. And my mum, I was about 8, my mum said to me, we're going to the Adelphi milk bar in South Denham. Did anyone know this? There's a milk bar called the Adelphi milk bar, and I'd never had a banana split in my life. So we couldn't, we didn't have the money to, we used to walk everywhere. And when I say we used to walk everywhere, my mother did 3 jobs. I cleaned the toilets at the Octagon. She cleaned for Cliff Skeggs, who was the mayor of Denham, and also worked in my library at Castorphan School. She walked 11 miles a day so I could wear a tie and drive a car to see you. She walked 11 miles every day so her son could wear a tie and come to you. So we're on this bus, and it was the first time I'd been on the bus, and we're sitting there, we're going down the hill, and we get into South Denham, and my mother had drawn me, because I wanted a banana split, but she was telling me about it, she drew it, and I had this little picture in my hand, this banana split. And so we went in there, 6 Māori kids, and my mum. And as we walked in there, the lady came up to her and said, can you afford to pay for this? And I started to cry, because my mother started to cry. And and she said, I can afford to pay for this, and we went out. My older sister, Hardy, Charlotte, said I was crying, and because when your mum cries, you cry too. And when we got back on the bus, I was crying. And I remember that night, she said something to me really powerful. She said, it's about iniquity. That's what it's about. So I shared with you I can't wait for the government to do anything for our kids. I'm not going to wait for it. We can't afford to wait. I don't moan about, I look at the latest budget and the principals go, there's nothing in it for us. God bless them, there's lots in it for our nurses, lots in it for our health system. Bless all those people, we're into that. And this, I was an interview done, and I really believe in that. We can't wait for someone else to change our light bulbs. We've got to change it ourselves. We've got to drive the change. I'm not waiting for miracle teachers or peer in physics out of nowhere. I've got 121 staff at my school, and I'm going to work with them. We're going to teach them. We're going to work with the resources that we have. If we get a teacher that comes from somewhere, happy days. But we're not going to wait. So when teachers come to work to teach at Massey, I need to see them teach. The kids observe them. And I was just saying to Briar, and it's such in England it happens all the time. In a previous job I ran 7 schools in London, so 3 secondary schools and 4 primary schools, working in Croydon and Enfield, and huge poverty, but I used to say to the kids there too, real poverty is not a chance for education. Real poverty is when you're in India or in the depths of Africa, you have no chance of education. So I think for us in our we must we must be the solution at our schools. There's a fantastic, some of you might have written, I encourage you to read it, it's called Waiting for Superman. Has anyone ever? It's a movie. It's good? Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant. He's my client. It's an absolutely brilliant book. And the guy, do you remember his name, the principal? Awesome. And what he said is he's I've been to a school, and it's just inspiration. I cried when I was at school. And he was reading a comic and it had Superman. And his mother took it away from him and said, don't read that rubbish, it's not true. And he realised that no one's come to save him. We've got to save him. So the first thing is that I sit in this beautiful school, and I listened to Tim, and I loved Tim, because I agree with what Tim's saying. Our kids need exams at year 11. When this NCA came out and we're having changes, and I'm going to talk about, I think, with Shumper's Gale, and you might know about it, it's in Congress, Joseph Shumper. The best thing is this conversation that we're having. I can't. What Briar and the research are doing is fantastic, and I love what Tim's thinking about here with the grammar and your own exams. That's great. So I come from where year 11 kids in Croydon and in Hackney and in Enfield, they're really ready. They don't feel stressed. When you talk about stress at level 1, I don't see it. I think as adults we create that stress around kids. It's about achievement. We must measure them. It's really important. I'm a big advocate of value added. So our kids come up to Massey. What value do they make? What additional value do we make after 5 years? And it's huge in a lot of schools. It's huge in a lot of schools. So what I would say is that we are in the midst of a thing. There's an economist, Shumper, and he had a vision for economics, and it was like a circular motion, and we drop in things to it that we already know about, and that's what we're having right now. So we've got NCA, we've got IGCC, we've got international baccalaureate, we've got a lot of things. So I think this is a brilliant conversation to have about what's wrong. But can I tell you, kids collect the NCA like it's Lego. It doesn't make anything. They go like this and they go, it doesn't because my mate's in that class. What I say to the kids is that, just imagine you go, how many kids are in the class visits? Your mate, yeah. So I take this picture. You go into the real estate, your mate walks in and then comes out and said, I've just picked the house we're going to live in for the next 5 years. Yeah, no swimming pool, you don't get your own bedroom, but you don't get a choice. So the problem with, I think, modular, I love linear exams. I think it's a good thing. In England they call them BTECs. You make a cup of tea and you get a GCSE. I don't understand it. So we're very strict. The last thing, Tommy, and give me 1 minute. Is that I think I want our kids to do English and maths. I inherited from a great man, a really fantastic principal, but I couldn't understand why they did English just for half the year, and then they did something else. I don't understand it. Our kids know that I want to do English and maths, and I want to take at least one science right through year 13. Do you know, we must compete. I want our kids, because I tell you this right now, you can quote me on this. Our kids are not bloody doing jobs at Massey where they say, do you want one ticket or two? Do you want one scoop? We're not doing those jobs. Someone else can do those jobs. Our kids are going to lead our community. Our kids are going to go to university. Because when our kids go shoulder to shoulder, Tim's kids and the kids at St Cuthbert's, we're going to have the same qualifications as them, but we just be a little bit tougher, because we're from the West.
4 fantastic, informed and passionate and different angles on where we are in New Zealand education, where we are in New Zealand education. Solutions though, what needs to happen? What are the ways forward? Practical, policy level, school level, pedagogical level.
Right, well, very quickly, we need a New Zealand curriculum. It needs to be standardised, so we know that if you are in Invercargill or Te Hapua, we know what you are being taught. Then we need a new assessment system, because assessment should be driven by the curriculum. At the moment, the assessment system has become the de facto curriculum. Until we have a new curriculum, then we don't know what the assessment system needs to be. So let's start at the beginning, a New Zealand curriculum.
Thank you very much.
I agree with that. I think it may be a fool's errand to think that you can have a curriculum that is not driven by assessment, because what you assess is what gets valued. I think that you need to design the I agree that you have to have the curriculum first, but then you design the assessment system to drive it in the direction you want to go, would be my take on that. I guess I want to add one more thing, which is that I think that in the future, the Ministry of Education needs to commit to an evidence base for initiatives that it introduces, that it doesn't do things on the basis any more of ideology or of just what somebody thinks looked like a good idea at the time, but that there is some reason for it, and not only that, it is properly trialled and properly evaluated before it is unleashed in full flight on the country.
Thank you. Briar.
I agree with that, and I agree with that. Just to add a small thing, I think on Elizabeth's point, a standardised curriculum, we need to be careful not to fall into a trap whereby people say we're ridding teachers of their autonomy. We need to always point out that on top of a standardised curriculum, there is plenty room to personalise and to create content that meets the needs of your students, but they're not incompatible. And on the point about assessment, of course it will always influence what's taught, but we can design assessments that include far more surprise about what will come up, so that teachers are incentivised to teach the entire domain of a subject rather than the sample from within it that's going to be assessed. And that's just a technical thing to do with assessment. It probably means less internal assessment, and it would be helped hugely by what Elizabeth's saying about standardised curriculum. For example, in history at NCEA, because there is no standardised curriculum, all the history questions for NCEA are entirely generic. I suspect a history teacher in the room, John, where are you? Where are you, John? Could tell us what's an example of a standard NCEA history assessment question?
Well, as you said, it's very generic, so you can sort of put anything in there that you really want. And I don't think that's good history. There's no historiography, no opinion, no ability to actually write decent essays.
And it means that when you go into an assessment, even an external exam in history, you know the question before you arrive. So there was no incentive to learn the entire domain of history, of that particular part of history you were studying, because you know what question you're going to answer. You could have written the essay 10 times before and learnt it and regurgitated it in the exam. So there has to be an element of surprise in order to ensure that we don't have teaching to the test.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just depth, not breadth. You just need to do, there are a number of us colleagues out here that teachers stop taking your books out and marking. Take those bloody books home and then bringing them back home. Because that's what we do. We've got to stop doing that nonsense. We don't feedback in the right ways because we've got to stop doing marking for stuff. But I think, first of all, for us, I think I'd like to see year 12 and 13. I run a very tight ship at Massey. But I would like to see years 12 and 13 just 15 hours a week in the curriculum, 7 hours in study time. I think we must release our kids and let our, because it's called, it's a guided release. By the time you get 12 and 13, if they can't, if I haven't shown them, taught them, and our staff haven't taught them how to study independently, this is retention at university when they go off to uni. That's an issue for me. So I think there's far too much babying, I think, in a lot of ways, especially when kids get to 12 to 13. The other thing, we've got to get our kids to school. Can I tell you this? It is a national disgrace. It's a disgrace that kids don't come to school. It's a disgrace. And we're getting, is it any of your own inspectors here? No, they're good people. Can you imagine and good people. But why do they want to look at my policies for? Why do they spend 4 days and they want to spend 2 days on? Isn't it easy QA? Shouldn't they do the policy assurance, all that nonsense? I want 6 colleagues who come to in my classrooms, looking at our teaching, triangulating with the kids, or the kids saying that that's what I want to see. But one, we must get our attendance is 95.1%. If you ever drive past Massey High School, just look to your left. We had a massive big building, and every week we update the attendance of every year group. It's so important we update for the house. We also put our national results out there and what we are looking for underneath it. And the other thing too is we must recruit our own people. When I say that, when I walked into Massey, I said to the receptionist, asked her about 23 years spent on reception. But guess what? She'd never been to a club. So got all the sports staff together, and we went on. We were learning walks. Every hour was a senior leader in our classroom, not just to say hello. We're in those classrooms to feedback on the teaching. And so we're in there, and so we took these staff, and it was usually be able to come to Massey or any school and say, any adult, what's the quality of teaching here? Well, actually, it's this. So they've all got their targets. The caretaker's got his targets. He knows what we're about. And here I am standing. This is sorry, Tom, I know I'm talking. My wife's that situation. But as I'm going down, so I'm taking the caretaker and a couple of cleaners. And here's this, I said, who's that? And he comes towards me. And he's got a suit on. And I started to cry because it's a caretaker. And because we're going in the classrooms. And he said, oh no, he had a little notebook. And he said, no, I gave him a hug. And he said, this is important. That we got a lot of good people. Stop calling support staff. Stop calling them support staff. They've got a real role to play. So on a bigger level, 15 hours with the curriculum time. And I think then we have guided, supported study, and I would say far less subject areas, just far more depth rather than you can get 80 credits for sharing a sheet. That's true. You can. It's all about 80 credits for sharing a sheet. I'm not sure about that.
Thank you to our panelists there. Glen, I wouldn't knock the whole taking books home unmarked, bringing them back. It's the only exercise many teachers actually get. Taking your books for a walk, I call it. Right, we had a lot of sense, opinion, great thoughts there. I'd like to invite now some audience participation. There won't be any trust games or sugar paper, but I would like to hear your thoughts and ask specific questions to panelists. Not all panelists have to answer every single question, just take a pass. And you're more than welcome to direct a question. Anybody who starts, it looks like they're risk of telling me their life story, and then there's a question mark in the end, will receive a hard Paddington Bear stare from you. And I'll take that for the biscuits. Okay, so any questions? No, I can't see anyone. I love the fact you're doing that. So, if you just project with your best teacher voice, please.
There's lots of optimism out there on research-based, but it's representing a group of teachers from the whole school sometimes, and one of my colleagues described it well, I feel like we're on the edge of a cliff and it's raining, and we look around us and the research just seems to be falling on deaf ears. Have you got any wonderful words that we can take away, that we can hold on to, so we can keep going, we just don't become truck drivers?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to address that actually in my closing words, but I'd like to invite anyone from the panel want to take a line on that.
So you're teachers, you're all,
Yes.
yeah, you're all our brothers and sisters. You know, what I say to you is you're a teacher. It's the greatest job in the world. And sometimes, it is tough, but it's the best job in the world. And you know what I'm talking about, because there are kids that, you may think in the classroom, bloody, I'm sick of that kid, but they go and say you're the best teacher I've ever seen, to their parents. So first of all, I think this is being naive and too simple. I just love my job. I just think being a teacher is so cool and awesome. I think you get with those kids every day. The fact that you're all here, I know you're great at what you do. So I'd say bless you and thank you so much for all that you do. I think what we do is great, but it's in our own hands. Do you know what I mean? We create the climates in our own classrooms, you know that. We've got to create a new climate in New Zealand, one of the real. And then, can I just say one last thing, and then I promise I will shut up. And this is controversial. This is very controversial. I think this could be controversial. Stop calling us Māori people priority learners. Stop calling us bloody priority learners, because it disables us. It disables us. Do you know, because I go to conferences and, Māori this, Māori, I hear what you say, but I've got Pākehā families who are poorer than a lot of our Māori families. But my own kids, they're 26, 28, 30, I wish they'd leave home. But they're 26, 28 and 30, but because they come from a decile 10 plus family, my grandson's, everyone's gone to university around him, but because we identify as Māori, we've got black and brown skin, we're stuck in this sort of a priority learner thing, base it on something. Any kind of assessment, just something, even though 80% of the kids may be struggling in Māori Pacific, but just let's base it on something. It's so disabling, I think, as they priority.
Just to have a quick story. The wonderful thing about teaching is, decades later, you can be, this is an experience I had, you can walk onto a plane and there's David Fane, the comedian, who yelled out to the entire plane, "Oh, there's Miss!" And he gave me a huge hug. It was wonderful. And he talked about the time I taught them this class of maybe Pacifica boys, year 12, Petrarchy and Shakespearean sonnets, and how much they loved it, especially when they wrote their own, which were just fun. So you get those moments decades later. He remembers.
We'll count it like counting. And shall we take another question? Don't be shy. Nobody? Okay.
Well, I've just got a bit of a statement. I'm an RTLB, so I work with children with learning needs and challenging behaviour. But what I found is in trying to get them support, that the education system is slow to respond to what is happening. Then we get into a crisis situation, then we become reactive. And also we have problem with power. So those in power make decisions, they only know what they know, and there's a select group of decision makers. So they make up all these decisions for us based on their knowledge. And then we talk about we're evidence-based service. So we're talking about using this jargon of evidence-based. But, and we believe that we are, but are we? And then we work in isolation, we work in silos, and that's the system. But we need diversity of thinking, and we need to work together. And then we have the mindsets of those in leadership, and they're sometimes resistant to change. So what I think is really important that we need to think about is prevention is better than cure. We need to be proactive. We need to work together, embrace research, diversity of minds, and include the voice of parents and children. And the power needs to be shared. And that's also knowledge is power, so that needs to be shared. And mindsets, we need to have the mindset that I can make a difference. And then we need to take responsibility and do the best that we can. And I think that's what you were saying, Michael, that you have decided you're going to make a difference. You're going to make changes. And I guess that's all that we can do. So,
I agree. I think personal responsibility is absolutely critical, and to inform ourselves as best we can. And I mean, research evidence is contestable. There's no open and shut answer to many questions, and it takes many research studies to start to form a really strong view of things. So one thing that we need to work on is our literacy in being able to digest research and evaluate it. That gives us more power to make good decisions. And also to cultivate the courage to stand up for things that we think are important on that basis, because the education system is astonishingly hierarchical. Well, there's no getting away from that. That's not going to change, but we can change our attitude towards that and speak respectfully, but speak strongly from a position of informed knowledge and act accordingly.
I think you
Thank you.
raised a really
Can I just move on to another speaker? I've got a lot of questions here, but thank you for the turning point. Anyone else got a question? Let me go. Just to make sure everyone's pointing at you, so yes.
And how can we empower teachers throughout New Zealand that would like to practice what they've learned today, and when they know that the school they work for will not support them?
Great question. I think a lot of people were asking that. Thank you. Yes, panel, anyone can take that one. How can we support teachers to improve their evidence usage where the schools won't support them? That's a lot. That went well. So,
I think it's, you align and you affiliate, because this will all be for nothing if you don't go and tell anyone else. And that's and coming back to what you're talking about, the power is always with you. Behind every successful kid is a warm and demanding adult. Behind every single kid. So one, never think that you're alone, because you are the power. You are the power. And I would say to those outside in teaching is that going back to it, you've just got to recruit one or two, because Margaret Mead said, it's only going to take a few people to change the world. So it takes a handful.
Sorry to give feedback. My experience is that unfortunately it doesn't take one or two. I've got a page and I've got 500 followers. I've got 27,000 people looking at this page. I've got a huge outcry of parents and teachers saying that they do not want these innovative learning environments for their children. And the result is that I've been driven away from the school my oldest son went to for 3.5 years. So unfortunately, we really need an answer how we can communicate effectively without backlash. The wonderful things we've learned today, and the wonderful things that we know, because we are experts of what is good for our own children. I'm really encouraged by this, that there are not enough of us nearly here. I wish this was on the television, you know what I mean?
One second. Actually, yes, let's move on to, because we've got time for two more quick comments and responses.
I'm a teacher in an innovative learning environment, not my choice at all. The ministry built the buildings for us and I had no choice but to go in.
I know.
But I'm in the job because I love teaching. So regardless of what the ministry are building for us, and regardless of what some people are calling innovative and future-focused learning, which to me is a load of crap, I'm there for the kids. And so I know that that's the ministry's doing that, and the principals have to have a party line to appease parents. that actually the teachers are the ones there, the cold face with the kids, and I guarantee most of them will be doing a really good job.
Can I just pick it up a line just to give the panelists a chance to respond to that? Irene, any thoughts on that? Is that?
You've probably done this, so I don't want to, but, I know you've got the blog and you've contacted, you've got an online community, but sometimes it's real life people getting together in the local hall with the local paper advertising it. You've done that.
I've been in 5 articles in the last month. I've talked to Craig Cliff, senior policymaker. I've debated with Leon Bernardi, the director of research from the AUT. I've been on the breakfast news with my burning question. And now I'm homeschooling my children from Monday. Like, I have hit a brick wall, and there is nothing I can do now apart from encourage other parents and teachers to not be afraid of the powers that be.
Okay, just because we are desperately running out of time, I'm sorry to beg your pardon, great points, but can I now invite the panelists to sum up perhaps one, if there's one burning thing you still want to say, a couple of sentences, please, fire away. Start with yourself.
Yes, well, when I said that we need a New Zealand curriculum, I forgot to add 2 crucial features of it. It must be based on academic knowledge, so it must have academic subjects in it. So that would be the first thing. But the second would be that we must have a teacher training system that trains teachers to be able to deliver such a rich curriculum. So let's have the best knowledge and the best way of teaching it. And let's draw on the creative, progressive, pedagogical tradition we have in this country. We've had a lot of teachers who, over the decades, the generations, have taught really well. We've got that fund of knowledge there about pedagogy. But now let's put that wonderful pedagogy, that creative pedagogy, together with a really rich academic subject-based curriculum. And that's what I would do.
So interesting one here. Michael, closing thought?
We are up against quite a lot. I don't think there is any easy answer about the way ahead. It's not an easy fight to have. It doesn't make it not worth having. It's utterly critical to have it. It doesn't mean we're going to win tomorrow or next year or whenever. And it's a sad thing that it's too late for your kids in the sense that they're now being homeschooled. Not that I'm sure that will be terrible for them at all.
They'll go back one day. They'll go back one day.
Right.
It goes back to world class.
But we have to keep having meetings like this. We have to keep having conversations like this. We have to be utterly courageous. We have to not worry about the fact that some people will call us all sorts of things for saying these things, and just keep at it.
Thank you.
Right.
Similarly, I hope people will write about this and write about your day, or somebody you talk to, or somebody you keep in touch with as a result of today. Speak at Research Ed next year. Keep demanding the evidence. Write to your MP. There is strength in numbers. There are bloggers in New Zealand and in Australia and around the world who I would encourage people to follow, who, none of what I say is ever original. I'm always standing on the shoulder of some giant who's really read the whole 300-page document and worked out what the synthesis was. Because we've got day jobs, or we're teachers, so we really don't have time to read any of this research. Keep the conversations going.
Thank you. Closing thought to you again.
Just persevere. Persevere. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years. Persevere. Because the fight is worth it. And I tell you, the fight is worth it. We are in a battle against poverty. Poverty of values, poverty in opportunities, poverty in debt. So, aspiration. When there's a gap, persevere. And stay with it. And just bless you for being here today and being able to share this story with lots of others.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have a round of applause for our